Newsfirst Newsline.
Hello there, very good evening. Welcome back to another edition of Newsline, coming to you live and direct as always from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. The fertilizer ban that is currently in effect here in Sri Lanka prevents any imports being made for chemical fertilizer, any form of chemical agrochemicals. Agrochemicals. Well, this decision of the government, this policy decision of the government has received mixed reactions from the general public. There is a faction that says, well, it's a good thing, we're switching to organic fertilizer. There is also a faction of the public that says, well, is this practical? How practical is it for us to switch to a 100% organic farming culture after we've been using chemical fertilizer for so long, and to make this change within this short span of time? To discuss these matters and more, we've got with us today Dr. Parakrama Waidyanatha. He is the former chairman of the Coconut Research Institute, also the former president for the Association for the Advancement of Chemicals, for Science, Agriculture and Forestry. He's also a consultant to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, a consultant to the World Bank, and also a consultant to the Asian Development Bank. A very good evening, Doctor. A long portfolio for you, but welcome to the show. Thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedule. Doctor, now you were very passionate about this decision that they've made. Passionate for the decision as in the impact that it can have on the general public, and you were worried. Why are you worried, Doctor, about this decision?
I think there is this perception that agrochemicals are the cause of many of these non-communicable diseases. Now, there is actually no scientific evidence to say that it is as bad as that agrochemicals have problems. And I think this has misled people. And as you see, in little shops in the nooks and corners, you find boards being carried saying "Vasa Visentora Palaturu." And so this Vasa Visa has become kind of a concern, and agrochemicals are not that bad. The problem is that there is misuse of agrochemicals. I think, you see, now why are we only worried about pollution from agrochemicals? What about industrial pollution? What about, for example, the pollution that is taking place from in the supply of electricity, the power plants?
The coal power plants.
The coal power plant, they emit per year 2 tons of arsenic, 2 tons of mercury, 3 tons of chromium, if I remember right, and 6 tons of lead annually. So it's a huge pollution problem. And look at the vehicles, the fumes that these vehicles emanate. There are right now 30 times more vehicles than we had about 20.
But Doctor, is the decision to switch from chemical fertilizer to organic fertilizer a bad one?
I think that I am of the view that organic fertilizer is also important, and that you can't in any case do it in a hurry. You know, it should have been phased out, because nowhere else in the world has it happened. Now I'll tell you several examples. One is Bhutan. You know, it's a small country with 700,000 people, with about 1,000 to 120,000 hectares of land. In 2008, they decided to go 100% organic by 2020. And how much did they get? They went only 10%. You see, there's no country in the world which is fully organic. Now, for example, of the countries in the world, only there are 17 countries that have more than 10%, and they went into organic in the 1960s, 70s. So this is not something that can be done in a hurry. I think it's very important that we fertilize our soils with organic matter. Then only it will retain water, it will retain nutrients, and it will do a lot of good to the soil. But this is not something that can be done in a hurry, because I think we should look at the history of shift from organic farming to conventional or chemical farming. It happened in the 1850s with certain important discoveries, like, for example, the soluble phosphate, and a few years later, synthesis of ammonia using nitrogen from the air. And then these became technologies, fertilizer technologies. And with the industrial revolution in Britain, there was the population was growing and there was affluence, and then people looking for more food, better food, and so on. And the scientists actually got concerned that the food supply was not enough. So this made them immediately sort of use the technology, the science that was known, convert it to technology, and then go ahead with conventional farming. And I think I remember in 1942, one of the top scientists of Britain, soil scientists, he said that we cannot, and in this time in the history, fathom how happy the farmers were then when they realized that in place of tons and tons of organic fertilizer, they could manage with a few bags of chemical fertilizer. It's a big story.
Dr. Parakrama, there might be some people who are wondering as to, of course, scientists have various arguments that they propound, but the Biodynamic Federation has commended the President for this move. The World Health Organization, an international organization, commended the President for this move. So when these international organizations really commend the President, why are you of a separate
No,
stance?
I'm not against going organic, but what I'm saying, it should have been a phased out program. It should have given time, you should go organic. In any case, my view is that the more organic material you put in the soil, the better. You see, but my feeling is that we can never reach 100% organic, and we can never produce all our food organically. I think we should go as far as we can, and gradually, and put in the soil as much organic fertilizer as we can. But to imagine the requirement. Now we have 2.2 million or 2.3 million hectares of agricultural land. On average, to get, assume that we put in 100 kilos of nitrogen fertilizer, you would need about at least 5 tons, more like 8-9 tons, because organic fertilizer, most of it has only about 2%. There are some which have 3-4%. So imagine the huge amount of organic matter you use. Can you do it in a hurry? Can you manufacture all this organic matter in a hurry? It takes time, and let's go slowly. And but my view is that we should not go so much for organic agriculture only, but go for integrated farming, organic plus chemical fertilizer, apply them in the right amounts, and see that the farmers are trained, advised to do the right thing. Right now what's happening is there is misuse of fertilizer and misuse of pesticides, and because the farmers think that the more you apply, the better. You see now, for example, vegetable farmers in the hill country, especially the potato farmers, they apply 5 times the recommended dose of fertilizer. And what happens, especially with phosphate, the excess phosphate, soil can bind some amount of phosphate, but the excess gets washed down. The streams ends up in the dry zone, in the reservoirs and so on, and causes algal blooms, which produces toxins. So this misuse of fertilizer is a big problem, and this must be stopped, because our extension service has collapsed over the years after the provincialization of the extension service, and I think the extension service has to be strengthened. The farmers must be trained, and that is the way to get on, and it must be a combination of chemical and organic fertilizer. The other problem with organic fertilizer is, you see, different crops require different amounts of fertilizer, and the same crop requires different amounts of fertilizer at different times. Now take the case of rice. Rice needs immediately phosphate, and then little later and phosphate and potassium and some nitrogen. Later it needs much more nitrogen. But with organic fertilizer you can't do it. You see,
Dr. Parakrama, one of the main allegations raised by farmers who are currently out on the street protesting this decision and lamenting to the government and to the authorities that they don't have enough fertilizer is that these decisions are being made by people who haven't even grown a small tree or a small plant in their homes or anywhere for that matter. They accuse the decision makers who make these policy decisions of not really knowing the science behind this matter and also not understanding the true nature of what these farmers are doing. They're saying we are the ones who are farming, we are the ones who know what's really happening here. Please listen to what we say. So there are well, varied opinions among the general public as well as to if we should switch to 100% organic, or is chemical fertilizer okay? Is it better to have food, like you said, without toxins, and this whole argument that chemical fertilizers have toxins in them? But most of these arguments also are based along party lines, because many people, I believe, maybe even people who are watching us right now, there is a chance that you might have not grown a single plant in your life. So we really do not understand this subject. What really does it mean to transition from the amount of organic fertilizer that we are using now as a percentage of our entire agricultural sector to 100%? What does that really mean? What does that entail? What does that require? What does that demand?
That's a huge exercise, and it's almost unattainable target, you see. In a hurry, the government is trying to do it in a season. I think, as I said before, we should go gradually, go as far as possible organic. But I repeat again that it should be a mixture of organic and chemical fertilizer. I think the whole problem why the president has been rushed into the decision because of some wrong perceptions. I think this is what must be cleared, that it is believed that it's the chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides that are causing many of these non-communicable diseases. Now the best case is the chronic kidney disease we find in the Rajarata is called CKDU. Now there are a lot of people still saying that it is caused by chemicals, and now this is a very important matter. I need to a minute or two to explain it. There had been a number of studies. In 2013 there was a WHO study, and there were no clear evidence on it as to what the cause was, but the WHO study said that I think some people in this having CKDU secreted more pesticide residues and they say than the allowable limit. That's what's called the reference limit. For example, now glyphosate was at that time much spoken pesticide. They said these people, 3.5% of the people, the CKD affected people, secreted more than the pesticide limit that can be allowed. And there are several others. They said 4, 5, 6%, not a huge amount. And then there was also reference to some amount of arsenic and cadmium being secreted by these people more, But funnily, I think this is a very important point, that there was no reference to the controls. Now, if you are doing an experiment, you have the CKDU patients on one side, then you must have the subjects without CKDU. There was no comparison. Then actually I got down the data, the raw data from National Science Foundation, which had all these data, and you won't believe, there were far more numbers with this above reference pesticide limit in the non-CKDU area than in the CKDU area. So how can you say that the agrochemicals caused it? I have written the papers number of times, we discussed this in number of fora, and this is the point. So now I don't know why the scientists who carried out that the
study
research,
came to that conclusion.
The research came to that conclusion, somebody told me that the minister virtually compelled them to say something, say that pesticides are involved. Then that was not all. Then 5 years later, I was also invited for that meeting. 48 top scientists in the world met and discussed this CKDU problem in Sri Lanka. And the conclusion with regard to pesticides was that there's no evidence, I repeat, no evidence to say that pesticides had a role in it. You see, that's the position. Now, but then see what happens. Some top people like Dr. Padenia, he goes around and says that it's the pesticide, the fertilizer that are killing these people. And in fact, I want to show this graph, if it can be seen here on the screen. Now, this is a graph that Dr. Padini showed on this, at one of the interviews, and he also showed a newspaper and said that this newspaper says that Sri Lanka is the country that uses the highest amount of pesticides and fertilizer in the world. Now, this graph is very interesting. Now, he showed this graph and showed this part of the graph, but you see in this part of the graph it's coming down. After about 2015, it's coming down. Now, he never spoke about it. What really happened was, it has now been found that this chronic kidney disease is caused by water, certain chemicals in the water, namely fluoride and magnesium coming from hard water. I think, if I may give me a second to explain this.
Doctor, we'll have to quickly cross over to a short commercial break, and we will be back with more of this discussion on the other side. Stay tuned. You're watching Newsline Live.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline Live. We're in discussion with Dr. Parakrama. Doctor, before the break, we were speaking about, of course, the fertilizer ban in Sri Lanka, and how practical is it to convert to 100% organic fertilizer here in a country that has been using chemical fertilizer for an extended period of time. Doctor, speaking specifically on this decision to convert to 100% organic fertilizer, there's a question that has come in, quite an interesting one from one of our viewers. The question goes like this: why doesn't the government produce a feasibility study with a plan on how the agricultural lands in Sri Lanka can be converted to be able to be cultivated on 100% organic fertilizer? Now, there's this very common saying that failing to plan is planning to fail. So is that what has happened here?
You put your finger right there. That's exactly the point. We should have had a grand plan, a master plan, I should say, planning how we should do this. Because in the government's policy document, it was stated that the country will go organic over a period of 10 years. Over a period of 10 years, and that would have been, I mean, I would support it if you can go all the way. My position is that we can never reach 100% organic, but that we can go as much as you can. So, but as you say, there should have been a plan, and a plan should have been worked, you see, and that had not happened. This is suddenly, and in fact, I was surprised the other day. A professor who is one of the supporters of this and who is advising the president said, you see, the Green Revolution took place in a hurry. It took place in a few years. Why can't we do this like this? Green Revolution took at least 5-6 years, and there are hundreds of people working here, scientists all over the world, Sri Lanka, with this famous Nobel laureate Norman Borlaug. It took at least 10 years for them to come up with that special plant type, the short-statured, erect-leaved plant that were more fertilizer responsive and produce more food. And in fact, if not for the green, now some people are still, who are advising the president, are sort of critical of the Green Revolution. If the Green Revolution had not been there, we wouldn't have had even 50% of the people we are having, or even if they were there, they would have been all starving. Because there's an interesting research paper by Sunil McLeod, a professor from the University of Manitoba. He says that had urea not been synthesized, had urea not been come up as a fertilizer, we would have not had 40% of the people we have. There are 2 or 3 other papers which say, yes, without conventional agriculture, you can't have half the population that we have now. And you see the amount of land we have can't increase. And the father of the Green Revolution, he was sort of critical of some of these, the ultra-environmentalists who don't look at the total problem. They were saying, this Green Revolution has been destructive. He says, if we go back to the yields of the 1950s, we would have to have 3 times more land that we have to produce the food that we need. Then he says, imagine the extent of environmental damage. Then you have to fell more forest, and then the severe environmental damage that would be caused if that were the case. So the problem is we are stuck with land. By 2050, there will be a real calamity. That's a prediction of many scientists, that with the available land, even with the technology, we probably may not be able to produce enough food. Of course, maybe there will be breakthrough that you and I can't think of it now. But that's the scenario, that the land is limited, the productivity is what must be increased, and productivity can be increased only through science.
Dr. Parakrama, we're in the final few minutes of this show. So based on what the government has made available to the general public on at least a glimmer of a plan on how we are going to transition from this, from whatever the fertilizer plan that we have right now to 100% organic fertilizer, is that to address the concerns of reduction in the harvest, the government has said, well, we will provide the farmers with compensation for the crops that they have lost as a result of converting to 100% organic fertilizers. Also, the president has made a pledge that the 80 billion rupees that is spent on the purchase of chemical fertilizers will be distributed or given to the farming community. There is no scheme has been announced on that. But however, recently we had the Minister of Environment, Minister Mahinda Amaraveera, coming out and apologizing to the farmers, saying, we're sorry for the inconvenience that this has caused you. On the other hand, the head of the executive, the media unit of the head of the executive issued a statement saying that farmers will not be farmers will not be inconvenienced by this move. So we're getting mixed statements, weird plans to say the least. Dr. Parakrama, as a person in the Coconut Research Institute and having done research on how these fertilizers work, how plants really generate and all that, is this a viable plan?
No,
from the details that have been made available to date?
No, this is not a viable plan. I'll give you a few examples now. Calculations by top economists show that our tea yields will drop by 50% even with some organic fertilizer put. You see, now look at how much organic fertilizer the tea would need. Tea would need between 200 to 300 kilos of nitrogen only per hectare per year. Now to get that, you have to have at least 20 to 30, let's say 20 kilos of organic fertilizer, and we have 200,000 hectares of tea. It's a huge amount of fertilizer you need. If you have 2.4 million acres of land.
We had a member of the government saying we will import organic fertilizer. Then when they raised concerns about microbial activity in organic fertilizer, he said, well, we'll import organic fertilizer without microorganisms.
I don't know whether this is feasible, you see. And we don't know what's coming, and I don't think what comes, that you can test everything to see what is in there. It's a very severe risk to be importing organic material from abroad. You see, you try and make it here. And now you mentioned about microbes. You see, now a lot of people have been saying that you can have microbial fertilizer. Yes, it is possible. But it is not something that you can have like, say for example, normal organic fertilizer or urea or muriate of potash or phosphate, because it is highly site specific. You see,
Dr. Parakrama, we're in the final minute of this show. I've got a number of questions from our viewers. This is a concern that they're having, and well, rightfully so. The question is, would this decision lead to a food scarcity in Sri Lanka?
Yes, as things are going, I think there will be a food scarcity. You see, now government says it will import food. But then why are we making a mistake, you see, and then trying to import food when we could have quietly gone ahead with the program, increase the organic extent as I said again and again, and rather than rushing into this decision, you see, we'll run into a problem. The crop yields will go down. The forecasts are that without the right fertilizer, the paddy will drop by about at least 30–40%. The tea yields will drop about 50%, then the other crops too. Fortunately, things like rubber and coconut may not feel it in a hurry, but in time to come they will also feel it.
Dr. Parakrama, thank you very much for joining us on our show. Unfortunately, we are all out of time here on Newsline. This is, of course, a very important topic for the people here in Sri Lanka, because this deals with our food security, the food security of our country. I will leave you tonight, of course, with one view that has been sent to us by one of our viewers. Now, this viewer says, organic chemical move is good, but it should be planned over months and years to change, not being foolish to try it overnight. Farmers are more important to this country than politicians. Of course, our fate has been placed in the hands of politicians, and we only hope and pray that they make the right decisions for the best interest of the entire nation. Thank you very much, Dr. Parakrama. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning into Newsline. Until we meet again tomorrow, take care and God bless.